Hello, and welcome to Technically Speaking, where scientists and engineers come together to chat about a common interest, share knowledge, and satisfy some curiosity. I'm Laura, and I'm joined by Jasmin to talk about steel and how it's being revolutionised for electric vehicles. So, the idea here is that because electric vehicles can get quite heavy, you need lighter steel to account for that. I found that really interesting because it means that it would lead to cars with better range or better fuel or battery efficiency. So to me, it's all about sustainable travel if we're all switching to electric vehicles that don't produce carbon emissions. So, Jasmin, emissions and sustainability are your area of expertise. So, what do you have to say about it?
Yeah, it is. And in cars, especially, the battery can account for around 25% of total weight. So that's quite a lot. So if you can make the steel lighter that's used to make the car body, then obviously that would help towards reducing the overall weight of the car. And then your battery, when you're driving, you can do more miles because your battery isn't having to propel as much weight. Also, it can mean you could put in heavier batteries and then you can maybe have better range. So yeah, it's lots of advantages of having lighter but stronger steel used to make cars.
And this is the thing, isn't it? Because the batteries don't have the same energy density as fuel that goes into internal combustion engine. They make them bigger to kind of compensate for that so they can get a reasonable range out of an electric vehicle.
Yeah, no, currently electric cars on a full charge, you can do between 200 and 240 miles, which is quite low if you compare it with an equivalent petrol, diesel, gasoline car. So yeah, you need to make the batteries big. But you also don't need the big motor, you just have a smaller engine. But yeah, in terms of fuel, if you're comparing a fuel tank with a battery's definitely way bigger.
I guess that's why making lighter steel becomes so important, as well as other materials that go into the car, because there are composites and all sorts that have been produced to make the electric cars lighter. So I would like to think that you could eventually end up with an electric car that's a similar weight to ones with the internal combustion engine. So having looked into it, currently things like the Nissan Leaf, which is an electric vehicle, it's almost 2 tons, and it's about 35% heavier than a similar specification petrol car. Even though it's still got some more lightweight components in it, it's still heavier.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really big concern. There was in the news a few years ago concerns about all the multi-story car parks in the world might collapse under the weight of all the electric cars just because they're heavier.
Yeah, and a lot of people say, well, why don't you put solar panels on top of car parks? Like, well, because if you've got a solar panel and an electric vehicle, that's probably doubling the mass that that car park is trying to take. It's just not going to happen, not without reinforcing
No,
it.
absolutely not. So yeah, anything that can help make electric cars lighter would really help make them better.
Yeah, and one of the reasons this fascinates me so much is because I did a doctorate in atomistic simulations, so I'm used to looking at how atoms interact with things and how these atoms contribute to physical properties of a
Yeah.
material. It amazes me that you have to go down to that level of detail. I just find it really cool that people do that to make these fully working lighter vehicles. Some people might disagree, though. Not everyone's that interested in looking at atoms and how they contribute to engineered structures.
Yeah, but it's pretty cool if you don't need to add chemicals to make steel stronger or lighter, and you can just do it by changing the atomic structure, then that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I guess that gets us into exactly how steel is made. And you've got a chemical engineering background, so I feel like you're probably best placed to explain this quite briefly.
Yeah, so most steel that we use today is made from iron. So we get iron ore and then we use that to make iron in a blast furnace. And then that iron goes into either a basic oxygen furnace or an electric arc furnace, which then adds some additives to the iron to make it into steel as well as adjust the carbon content. And most steel is you either get it in slabs or in ringgits. So yeah, that's how most steel is made these days. It's quite fossil fuel intensive, but you also can end up with lots of different types of steel.
Yeah. So you basically heat it, add some
Yeah,
other chemical
yeah.
elements, and then shape it somehow,
Yep.
and I guess you have to cool it down at some
Yep,
point.
you need to cool it.
And what I was reading was that it's the tiny changes that steel manufacturers can make to the heating and cooling that then affects how the atoms arrange themselves in the steel, which then affects the mechanical properties it has, like how strong it is or how tough it is. Yeah, and well, now I started to wonder because I don't have a formal material science background or a chemical engineering background. I just sort of picked this stuff up over the years. It's
Nothing
like,
wrong with that.
how? No, it's how do they know how to change the temperatures or the time it takes for it to cool down to get a particular structure from the atoms? It just amazes me that people just seem to know this stuff.
It could have just been something that they've figured out decades ago, but then they didn't really have an application for it. But now they're just really building on it. You never know.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean, steel's been around for quite a long time.
Yeah. Like, we've been, like, there was the Iron Age, and, like, so I'm pretty sure people knew ways of, like, heating and quenching iron to make it harder and stronger rather than brittle. And same would apply to steel, although obviously not over thousands of years.
No, I'm guessing back in ancient times, some of that was just kind of like accidental. Like they didn't really know that they were putting a particular additive into that metal. It just kind of happened.
Yeah.
But I did a little bit of reading into this, and I came across some stuff that was published when it was presented at a scientific conference, and they basically go back to what they would probably call first principles, so a bunch of maths that describes the mechanical properties of a material and how that relates to how the atoms arrange themselves, the microstructure they call it. So it's not necessarily just trial and error anymore. There's this massive body of knowledge that involves maths that people that are smarter than me obviously can make sense of and use that to figure out how to adjust temperatures.
Cool. So it's like a lot of maths. Do you think there's some kind of like algorithm that we could use AI for? Or is it not quite something AI would be ready for?
I would guess that because the maths looked relatively straightforward to me, it's probably not something AI or machine learning, is a lot of people would like to call it, because it's not actually intelligent, artificial intelligence. I imagine that it's a bit too simple for it if artificial intelligence is about spotting patterns that humans can't spot. However, I did find some research that is looking into things like if you've got all these different types of steel, all these like hundreds and hundreds of grades, and they vary in their compositions, can you spot patterns in those compositions that link to the mechanical properties such as the strength or the bendiness of the steel, and then use that to predict different steel grades that would have different properties that you're interested in?
Cool. So there's different generations of steel, and the one that we're talking about now is called third generation steel, which is also known as advanced high strength steels, and they're especially good for automotives, i.e. cars, just because they are lighter and stronger. So that means that you can make the car stronger, but also apparently they do better in crashes. So we might be safer if we're in a car that's made out of this cool new third generation advanced high strength steel.
Oh.
Yeah, so lots of pros about it.
So I'm guessing if it performs better in a crash, it's somehow able to absorb the energy from that crash and then maybe not deform as much as older generations of steel.
Yeah,
Does that
yeah,
sound
that's what I
right?
get from it. If it's meant to be perform better in a crash, so it doesn't like crumple and deform.
Cool. Yeah, so I saw a little bit about this, and again, it all goes back to these sort of the first principles and the maths that people have done. And they're essentially trying to use two different crystalline structures within the steel that have different mechanical properties. So one of them's quite ductile, so it'll bend, so it'll when that steel gets compressed in a car crash, it'll absorb that energy. But then there's a different type of crystal in there that's a lot stronger. So it effectively gives the same steel two different properties at once.
Nice.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty smart. Again, it's all about the atoms.
Yeah, and it's cool that you just do this just by changing stuff related to the atoms, and you don't need to add any additives or do anything related to the carbon content of the steel. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's it. It's exactly the same composition, just different heating and cooling cycles. That is something else that artificial intelligence is being used to try and figure out. Again, looking at all these different grades of steel and how they're made and seeing which processing parameters have an effect and can you use those to predict what sort of properties you'll have.
Yeah.
So, lots of scope for artificial intelligence or machine learning to be really useful for science, I think.
Yeah. Does this mean that artificial intelligence is going to discover the fourth generation of advanced high strength steel?
Or maybe they'll start calling it something different. It's not necessarily a new thing.
Yeah,
This is
no.
stuff that's been going back to the
Yeah.
90s. But yeah, in the future, because I think there's quite a long way to go from what I was reading. Who knows? Who knows what artificial intelligence could be coming up with for
Yeah, who
science?
knows? But the really big steel manufacturers like ArcelorMittal and Tata Steel, like they're already looking into, and I think they're already starting to sell these new types of steel, specifically like aiming at the automotive industry, just because it is lighter and stronger, so it does have really good benefits for cars. But you could also have like the stronger and lighter steel for like construction or for making ships or building airplanes. So it's got lots of places where you can use it, not just for cars.
Yeah, that's very true. I quite like that idea that you started off with a challenge to solve. We need electric vehicles because they're better for the environment. They don't have the emissions associated with them that internal combustion engines do. So then you need better steel, and then you can use that steel for other things.
Yeah.
And what strikes me that, although this might have implications for more sustainable forms of transport, is the steel industry itself becoming less sustainable because it's introducing even more types of steel and even more ways of processing it that could be maybe more energy intensive. And you said it's quite a fossil fuel intensive industry.
Yeah, you use a lot of coal and coke in the blast furnace and the basic oxygen furnace. And it's pretty difficult to decarbonize. You can use hydrogen, but you still need you need the source of carbon from somewhere.
Yeah, so inherently you can't really decarbonize steel making. I guess you can stop the carbon going into the environment if it's meant to be going into the steel.
Yeah, you can try to stop that, but there's like research into other ways, so like using like biogenic sources of carbon or just trying to increase steel recycling. Because if you can increase steel, because like steel recycling, you just melt the steel and then you reshape it. But because there's so many different types of steel, you can't really do that because the impurities will really change the chemical properties and you could end up with a really inferior type of steel.
Yeah, I think we've discussed this before, haven't we? That because you don't necessarily know what you're recycling unless you did a lot of research to figure it out, that I don't think anyone would really want to do because it would be inefficient,
Yeah.
then it's not as good as starting out with fresh materials, which I think is unfortunate because we're essentially talking about, rather than just making stuff and throwing it away, reusing it constantly and being more efficient with resource use.
Yeah, but I think it's so like it. I don't think the actual new type of steel is going to have that much impact in reducing the carbon emissions of steel, but it might have an impact on reducing the carbon emissions from the automotive manufacturing sector, just because you can just cold press this steel because it is strong and but also malleable enough that you don't need to like use any heat to like get the shapes that you need. You just cold press it. So I guess that's a benefit, but I guess for the overall emissions of building a car, it's probably pretty low.
No. I mean, if we're talking about things far into the future when artificial intelligence is doing so much for us, I feel like there should be an easier way of figuring out what material something is made of, like what different impurities that steel has, and then making better decisions about where it goes. So either you label everything, and I've heard talk of doing this, like say you're building an entire building and you kind of label every single component in that building so you know where everything is and you know how to take it apart again. Could you do the same for the steels? Can you imprint on it its composition? Or could you make better analytical technology that you just kind of looks at it and says, oh yeah, that's clearly got a little bit of magnesium in it or something?
Yeah, that'd be really useful. You can like label things a little bit like how when you have like IKEA furniture and all the different components are labeled, you can have something like that. Or we could try having less types of steel. Do we really need all these different types of steel? Because I'm confused by like why we need so many and what the difference is.
I would like, well, on the one hand, I would like to say that why would you make it if there wasn't a purpose for it? But then on the other hand, sometimes companies just like making something so they can sell it and pretend that it's better than something else. So I don't know.
I only really know stainless steel. Don't really know any other types of steel, but I know that they exist.
Yeah, and for sure there are some grades of steel can be really useful. So I imagine the steels that are used to make a car are a little bit different to your stainless steel sink because they have to survive impacts and whatever else.
Yeah, for sure. I'll be very impressed if my sink could survive a head-on collision with a car.
Oh, we could try it.
Maybe you could try it when you remodel your kitchen.
I will willingly do that. I hate the stainless steel sink that I have. It is not hanging around.
Yeah, just like let us know.
Well, I need to find someone that's willing to drive a car at it.
Yeah, that first.
So yeah, if I do that experiment, I will let you know. I don't think I'm going to find someone that's willing to drive their car at my sink. But I think that ultimately, if we're talking about sustainability, it doesn't really have to be a compromise. And I hate the idea that companies seem to have such a monopoly over things because they don't really want to tell you what's in their product because then you'd copy it.
Yeah.
To me, it's about looking at these things from all different angles, and I feel like manufacturers should be more transparent about what they're doing. But maybe that's a different kind of story because if they're giving away their secrets, how are they going to function as a business?
Yeah, I would agree because when we were researching, it's really difficult to actually figure out how they actually make these steels besides the specific way that they heat and cool it. Because we don't know what the temperatures are, we don't know for how long, we just know that they do some stuff with heating and cooling.
So there you go, we want more transparency. We want a different way of thinking about how products are made, I think. And I think it shouldn't really be about making money. It should be about just doing a nice thing for the world. That's how companies should measure success, I think.
Yeah, would be nice. Different world if that was the benchmark for everyone rather than how much money can you make.
It would. Who'd have thought we'd end up there having talked about, wow, isn't steel and atoms amazing? I think that's probably a good place to leave it. So we did start off talking about a new generation of steel that is currently in production and being researched that would lead to electric vehicles that have got even better efficiency than they do now, hopefully starting to rival what internal combustion engines can do. And then we kind of moved on to looking at whether it's really sustainable or not. And we're on the fence on that one, but we can definitely see a way forward. I also still think artificial intelligence has got quite a good role to play there. But again, it's quite a long game. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. The views expressed in this podcast belong entirely to the person that said them. They do not represent any industry or organisation. If you enjoyed listening to these views, it would really help us out if you could rate us, leave a review and tell a friend. This podcast was sponsored by no one, but if you're interested in funding us to continue to have frank discussions about science and engineering, please get in touch.